The Velikovsky Heresies by Laird Scranton. Part 2. You're listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed, high atop the Edwards Plateau. And winter forgot us here.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Still hot.
Yeah, it got kind of cool, and then the sun got turned up or something.
But we got some chill nights. It's not too bad at night.
Yeah. I guess it does cool down a little bit at night. But what's up with the moths? And then the butterfly. What is the mother butterfly migration during the day? Is it butterflies or moths during the day?
Those are butterflies, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, we've had this enormous...
Everybody's car looks terrible.
That's right.
Just massive death on the front of everybody's car.
That's right. And that's been going on for at least a couple of weeks now.
Yep.
Wine is settling down, almost done with the secondary fermentation for all of the last bits we harvested. Yep. Just a few barrels are still lagging behind, and those are the ones in the metal barrels, right?
And the
steel barrels. So the wood somehow helps with the secondary fermentation.
Yeah.
And how is that? Why does that work?
The wood contains a lot of the bacteria.
Oh, okay.
It just has it in there naturally, so that's what I'm told. I don't know for sure. But
because I have heard that, like, if you use a used barrel, a cleaned used barrel, that it has the bacteria in there because it's done it before, right? But I didn't know, because we got new wood barrels.
Yeah. But I mean, the bacteria, there's three main types, and they're the one you really want is Enococcus eni, and it's present in the vineyard. It's out there in nature.
Right. Yeah.
So you have a chance of getting that one to really take over, but there's other possibility that you might get these others that kind of take over, and they may have any number of strange smells and flavors. So, you want that one. It has a good. It doesn't really mess with the flavors and the smells too much,
except the way that you want it to.
Yeah. But it doesn't have off odors,
Yeah. And the idea is like the primary fermentation is turning sugar into alcohol, right?
Right.
The secondary fermentation is a more complicated and long-term process that turns...
It's a bacteria turning malic acid to lactic acid.
And malic acid is bitter.
It's got a much more bitter taste.
And the lactic acid is like...
Buttery
and smooth.
Described.
Yeah.
And also, malic is a stronger acid.
So that secondary fermentation will change the pH a bit.
Yeah, it'll raise the pH.
Right. Which is why it's a good idea to target your pH early in the process, knowing that the pH is going to go up.
Slowly rise, yeah. So like I was saying, those strains of bacteria are just out there in nature. So of course they're going to be in the oak too. And the oak wood is actually aged outdoors. Like when they cut these staves... They stack these. If you look at a cooperage, they have these huge stacks of oak staves. Like pretty thick ones.
Yeah.
That they then plane down or cut and plane into the actual barrel staves. But they age them outdoors, some cases for years, I think. Right. They're just in the weather all the time.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Wow, how do they keep them from turning gray? Or
they have them all stacked on each other in like this sort of Lincoln log style.
Oh, okay.
And they're they'll have these real tall stacks, and they just sit out there in the sun. They get rained on. They get everything.
Nice.
And it's I don't know.
Yeah, and I was looking at the difference. Like there's all these different types of ways that they can cut the staves. Like they can split them instead of sawing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some, like one of the barrels that we got, like there are these weird, some of the pores are just open. And so you'll have, like the wine will permeate into the pores, and then there's just an open channel. It'll just come right out to the end of the stave and just start coming out.
Dripping, yeah.
And we had that for like a week.
Yeah.
I ended up having to hit that thing with a punch to make a little like cone-shaped hole. And then I used our little lathe and got some oak wood that we had and lathed it into a little cone shape and just hammered it in there and chiseled off the end, and it just stopped the flow.
Nice.
I looked it up on YouTube. Because the barrel guys are in California. I'm like, hey, this barrel is leaking. They're like, we're working on it. I got this Tupperware under there. It just keeps filling up every few days.
Yeah.
Full of wine. So I finally just was like, well, what do they do? I looked it up on YouTube and it seemed pretty simple. So
yeah,
hammered a few pegs in there, shaved them off, and it's dry.
Yeah.
Stopped leaking. And then the guy called me. He's like, hey, you still have that problem? And I told him what I did. And he was like, well, we're going to send you a new barrel anyway. So we're getting a new barrel. $900.
Wow.
That's how much they cost.
Man.
Plus shipping.
Donkey Kong must have spent a lot of money to throw all those barrels.
Oh, my God. Can you imagine? That guy wasted so much money.
$900 a barrel. Well, they are very high end.
Yeah,
those guys build the best, except for that one.
Yeah. I mean, but that just happens. I was surprised to hear. I thought they were going to send me a repair kit.
Yeah, right.
He was like, nah, man. That's unacceptable.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
I was like, all right. Damn right.
Damn right it's unacceptable. I had to drink all that wine off the floor.
Yeah. So it's going well. And our consultant guy, that older gentleman who's been farming for 30 years and farming grapes. Of course, he's been farming all his life, but he's been farming grapes for like 30 years. He's made wine. He has a very successful winery here called William and Chris.
He is. We call him Bill. William. Yeah, we call him Bill, but he is the William of William and Chris.
Yeah, so he's got a lot of experience, and he's been kind of, consulting with us since the very beginning of planting the grapes and this whole process for like the past 4 years. And he came out yesterday and tasted the new wine. He was just like, wow.
Yeah.
His reaction, I was just like, yes.
Yes.
That was great. He was like, oh, man. All right. You don't need me anymore. It's like, whoa, what are you talking about, buddy? Whoa. But yeah, it's I'm real proud of it. So it's going good.
Yeah. And that's a good feeling because that was a lot of work. And, and then Kyle and I are making executive decisions on giant vats of wine when no one else is there. We're like, are we doing the right thing? And we're like, well, I don't know, but let's put 5 pounds of this acid into this wine. I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I know. And one barrel of finished wine is like 10 grand worth of like gross of wine.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to pick up these crates that have 2 barrels on them with the forks in the machine, and you're like picking it up, and you're just and you're like, oh my God, I just picked up
$20,000 of liquid.
It's not for the faint of heart.
That's right. All right. Should I introduce the Watcher? We do have him with us today, and he's got his headset. Watcher, you want to pop on and say what's up to everybody? It's been a while since you've spoken to the Snake Force. You there, buddy? He probably was not prepared to turn on his microphone.
I never am.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, there you are.
What do you do with a guy like me?
Yeah.
So, how are the hotels in space?
They're good, especially near the space border of Mexico. So, interesting fact about monarch butterflies who do the big migration south. They were bred on the International Space Station.
What?
Yeah, they bred them on the International Space Station. One of the experiments was monarchs.
Okay, but not the ones that they're not the ones we're seeing migrate.
No.
I'm like, wait a minute.
Did an experiment.
Those came from space?
No. No, but we brought them to space.
Oh, I bet it would be interesting to watch a butterfly fly in space. That would be cool.
Ooh. Does it get lift?
I mean,
well, there's air
in the cans,
in the cabin.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, fair enough.
So just one little flap of the wings and zoom, it's gone.
All right, that's a good enough image for me.
Yeah,
I would rather see a June bug in space. That would be cool. Because I mean, they act like they're in space already when they're
that's
flying
right. They're
around.
just running into everything. Yeah,
Constantly on its back, no matter what it does.
yeah. All right.
Well, glad to have you here, man.
Yeah, we are glad to have you here.
I know you were here last time, but sort of here.
Yeah, kind of here. So this time it's for real. All right. Let's go ahead and do space weather news. From spaceweather.com. New sunspot alert. A new sunspot is emerging in the sun's southeastern limb. Its magnetic polarity marks it as a member of solar cycle 25. Astronomers with safe solar telescopes can look for it here, and there is a link. Minor B-class solar flares are likely in the hours ahead.
Thank you, Bill.
Trying out my different news guy voices here.
Good.
Yeah, I did NPR last week and then did 1940s.
Family Guy. Whatever.
Family Guy.
Simpsons is a news guy.
Let's see. Current conditions. Solar wind speed is 275.9 kilometers per second. The density is 7.2 protons per cubic centimeter. And it's interesting because it says a new sunspot, the top story is new sunspot is emerging. Okay, it's emerging, but the sunspot number is still 0. So I guess it's not qualified as a sunspot yet. Current stretch of spotless days in 2020 is 204 total. That puts us at 71%, as opposed to the 77% of 2019. And the neutron count today is 9.4% above the space age average, which is rated as high. And there is an aurora story here. Let's see. More red auroras. For the second night in a row, they have photographed red auroras, which is an extremely rare event. They were photographing these in Finland. October 13th, auroras appeared out of nowhere, and immediately they noticed that the green layer was topped by red layers. Normally, auroras are green, the glow of oxygen atoms about 150 kilometers above the Earth's surface. But red auroras are also caused by oxygen atoms, but at higher altitudes, between 150 kilometers and 500 kilometers. At those heights, the temperature and density of the atmosphere favors atomic transitions that emit red photons. So the photos show red stacked on top of green, just as this theory predicts. So, mystery solved? Not quite. Red auroras are usually too faint to see or photograph. They come from an extremely rarefied layer of the atmosphere, and moreover, the very slow atomic transitions that produce red photons are easily interrupted. So even experienced observers rarely see them. So what is causing this sudden riot of red over Finland? We don't know. And they have been happening for 3 nights in a row. So look at that. That's beautiful.
That's cool.
Clearly visible.
Wow.
Yeah, so you guys can check the pictures out if you go to, yeah, look at that one. If you go to spaceweather.com.
Huh. Very cool.
And that is your space weather news for this week.
And, yeah, 15 minutes ago, I just got the results back from the ENO-FOSS.
Which is, explain.
A very expensive machine that it's like you put a drop of wine on it and it uses lasers, I guess, and tells you all the chemical makeup.
Very precise, but not accurate.
What do they say? It gives you the same wrong numbers every time.
Right.
It's very consistent.
Yeah.
Or very something like that.
Something like precise but inaccurate. Was it very, very precise but not very accurate, or
that's
something
right,
like
that's
that?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
It's got to be calibrated constantly to like what you're doing.
Right. So if some other winery has their $30,000 or $40,000 ENO-FOSS and they have calibrated it to their particular wines, and then you show up as a schlub and you're like, hey, can you test my wines? It's calibrated to their stuff. So
yeah, and a lot of that is with pH and other things like that.
Lasers.
What we're looking for is the presence of malic acid, and we've got 0 and 0 and 0 and 0 and 0 and 0 and 0, and then 0.1 and 0.2, and then 0.
Nice.
So it's like we got
those
these
two metal barrels.
Metal barrels have 0.1, and I think it's grams per liter or something like that.
Yeah. And so we just did a chromatography test, and that was basically what that test showed, that the two metal barrels had a tiny amount still remaining.
Doesn't tell you how much, just shows you whether it's there or not.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I thought it would have been higher than that, so that's good.
Yeah, so we're almost done. We can almost stabilize the stuff.
That's right. All right. Crazy world we live in out there, folks. New Hubble data suggests there is an ingredient missing from current dark matter theories.
What? You mean dark matter?
Yeah, and the same universe where black holes are torturing and killing stars by spaghettification. Spaghettification. Did you see that story? This black hole rips this star apart. They watched it happen.
I didn't.
There
see
was
that
like
story.
Normally it's like they can't hardly see it because there's all this dust and everything in the way. But
right.
They had this really clear picture, and the star just has this. It's just pulling all the stuff. Yeah, it spaghettifies it.
Yeah. It turns.
And the weird thing is in the story, which they don't go into any detail about this, but it's spaghettifying the star, and it completely just sucks the whole thing into a giant spaghetti. But while it's doing that, it's blowing all this crazy stuff out of the poles of the black hole.
Right. Yep.
So give me a break, guy. The gravity has poles?
Right. It's
And
polar.
so
Yeah.
it's
No,
throwing
that's
it out of
magnetic. Right.
The magnets are more powerful. The electromagnetic spectrum is more powerful than the gravity.
The gravity at higher than the speed of light. Yeah, with an escape velocity. I don't know, but that is that is the problem.
Yeah,
and that's a big problem. That's what quasars are, right?
It's a giant
supermassive
problem.
A supermassive black hole at the center of a galaxy that's shooting off these two enormous jets from the north and south poles.
Yeah.
They're called quasars. They're the most violent and energetic things in the universe.
So powerful that even light can't escape. Yet it's blowing the materials out of the poles.
I'm like, hold on a second. Yeah. And the explanation is sometimes that it's because the black hole is spinning and it's got this ridiculous spin. And so it's a giant magnet. And I don't know. Yeah.
But what I really want to read to you guys is this story. There's quite a few sources for this story. I'm going to read the ancientorigins.net, ancient-origins.net version.
Oh, yeah. Great site.
Archaeologists at White Sands National Park in New Mexico, examining a 10,000-year-old track of human footprints, have made more fascinating discoveries. So this story, I was seeing this in my feed for a while, and I don't know why I was skipping over it, but I was like, footprints. I don't know why, but I finally clicked on this one. And so there were previous stories about this where they kind of got it wrong, and they've basically come out and said, okay, no, they're sort of correcting this, but this is just crazy. They've also unearthed a trowel full of unanswered questions about the time-worn mystery of the relationship between humans and Ice Age megafauna. So again, 10,000-year-old track of human footprints. The Alkali Flat in New Mexico, USA, has a huge salt playa, which is a dry lake, known as the world's largest gypsum dune field, caused as warming climate shrank an ancient lake bed that was eroded by wind to create dunes and salt flats. On these flats, archaeologists have discovered hundreds of thousands of human footprints dating from the end of the last ice age, about 11,550 years ago, as well as the prints of many Ice Age megafauna that stalked and were stalked by early humans. In a 2018 Ancient Origins article, we featured a paper that described the ancient ghost tracks of now extinct giant ground sloths, mastodon, mammoth, camel, and direwolf, that only become visible at the surface during specific weather conditions, and it was suggested that the humans stepped into the sloths' prints as they stalked them for the kill. Moving in large, flailing circles, the giant sloth was thought to have risen up on its hind legs, sweeping its arms to keep the hunters at bay, and when it overbalanced, its knuckles and claws thumped to the ground to steady itself. But now, in light of new evidence, this story has now changed significantly. A new paper published in the Quaternary Science Reviews greatly expands on the initial 2016 observations, presenting what is described as the longest trackway of fossil footprints in the world. According to phys.org, this new discovery comes from White Sands National Park in New Mexico. The findings were made by an international team working in collaboration with staff from the National Park Service. Unlike all of the other human footprint trackways, this one is remarkable for its length, measuring at least 1.5 kilometers or 0.9 miles.
Wow.
And is exceptionally straight. The linear nature of this particular track indicates that the individual did not, even by a meter, deviate from their determined course. And even more thought-provoking was that the person returned on their own trackway a few hours later. Just like detectives piecing together the clues at a modern crime scene, the depths and twists of each of these footprints has been measured, revealing details about every inch of the track, so accurate that they determined when the person had slipped here or stretched there. This ancient track is made up of small fossilized footprints, which the researchers believe they were most likely to be made by a young woman or possibly an adolescent male. From this one long, straight track, they determined that because the ground was wet and slick with mud, the person maintained what would have been an exhausted speed of over 1.7 meters per second, compared with a comfortable walking speed of about 1.2 to 1.5 meters per second on a flat, dry surface. So, in other words,
They were trotting? Or
a comfortable walking speed from 1.2 to 1.5 meters on a flat, dry surface, yet this is slick mud.
Yeah.
And they're going at over 1.7 meters per second.
Okay, so they're just like power walking.
Power walking.
Because, yeah, you're right. Because running would mean only the heels weren't
they
touching.
were walking,
Yeah,
for
okay,
sure, yeah.
All right.
Do you know that, so they talk about the allegory of the footprints in the sand. When you saw only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with that old allegory. Well, it describes a person who sees two pairs of footprints in the sand, one of which belonged to God and another to him or herself. As the two pairs of prints became one, it is explained in the allegory that this is where God was carrying the person. Returning to the alkali flat, at several places on the outward journey, a 2-year-old child's tracks were found as the carrier set a child down, perhaps to adjust them from hip to hip or for a moment of rest. But while the child was carried outward, it was not present on the return journey. All of the above discoveries were derived from the shapes, depths, and twists of the footprints, which were found to be broader on the outward journey, caused by outward rotation of the foot when its owner is carrying a heavy weight, while on the homeward journey, they vary less in shape with a narrower form. Furthermore, between the time the person made their outward journey and return journeys, a giant sloth and a mammoth crossed the outward trackway, evident due to return journey footprints crossing those animal tracks.
I wonder if the animals were going in the same direction, like the mammoth and the sloth.
Yeah, from one side to that's a good question.
Running from the same thing or something.
Yep. Good point. There's a lot to be studied about this story. So, in contrast to the story first published by the archaeologists, that the giant sloth moved in flailing circles on its hind legs, sweeping its arms to keep the hunters at bay, the sloth tracks show that it had been aware of the human's passage, and when it reached this trackway, it reared up on its hind legs to catch the scent, pausing by turning and trampling the human tracks before dropping to all fours and making off. It was aware of the danger. That's what they say, was aware of the danger, but all it's showing, like they at first thought that this thing was being hunted, right?
Yeah.
Now they're realizing that the human tracks that went out while they were carrying this child were just not too long before this sloth walks by and
smells.
Smells it, stands up, kind of moves around like, whoa, what's going on? And then keeps going.
So it wasn't being hunted.
Yeah. While this unique trackway has already offered deep insights into human movement 10,000 years ago, it raises as many new questions. What was the person doing alone, moving at speed, with a child, out on the dangerous playa? What is for sure is that the child-carrying woman must have felt terribly vulnerable in this wild and unpredictable landscape, which I don't know how they can know that for sure.
Right.
Whatever her motivation was, she made her journey, delivered the child, and returned. So,
Wow.
in the other stories that are out there, they talk about also a mammoth passed by the track, the outward track.
Yeah.
And never paused or nothing, just didn't even care, right?
Yeah.
But then it's only within a few hours that the return trackway comes, and the footprints, they talk about the footprints on the return track are much lighter. They don't, the ones going out have these angled, deep cuts, right? Because they're carrying this child.
Yeah.
And then at certain portions, you see like the child's footprints are like all around.
Yeah.
And then they go again, the footprints get heavy, and then they stop some portion of the journey, and the child's footprints are going all around again.
Like she was putting him down to let
putting him down and,
or, her,
taking
whatever.
a rest or whatever. It could have been a young adolescent male, they said too.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
I don't know. I was just like, oh my God, like that for some reason.
Where the stories lie.
Yes. And Ty and I were talking about this, and we were just like, you know, at first the kind of the story is making you think, okay, they were hunting a sloth or something. No,
Yeah.
okay. But the fact that those tracks are so straight, you know, we're thinking, okay, so they knew where they were going.
Yeah.
And they took this, so it could have been simply of like, oh, I got to take the kid over here and drop him off with this group of people.
Yeah.
It would have been something simple like that. But then you start to like, okay, wait a minute. This is an ancient lake.
Yeah.
And this is, they're saying
Right at the end of the...
That's right. The lake has dried up.
Yeah.
And so they're following along in another one of the stories I read, it says they're following along the bank of the lake. But that's not a straight line.
No.
So I don't know. There's some confusing aspects to the story, but...
And you're not crossing the playa if you're walking
right.
the bank.
They crossed the dried up lake that was still muddy with a child, came back in a straight line following their exact tracks with no child.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I was just like...
Yeah, that's intense. That's... Yeah, that's... You got to wonder. I mean, all I can say is I hope they were delivering the child to some other family or something.
Yeah,
But
all
yeah,
kinds of things come up. You know, it was like sacrifice,
yeah.
Who knows? But that story was just blew my mind.
Yeah,
you know, really put me, you know, there. And there's pictures of it on the website. The little child's footprints walking around the
adult's footprints. Yeah, wow,
it's intense.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I mean, I felt that way, even if, you know, we're still not sure if those prints we found down south are human.
Right. That's what I kept thinking of too.
But I had the same sensation. I was following what looked like tracks of human prints, and a lot of times it looked like they were running. And, you know, I'm looking at the landscape around, and I'm just like, oh my God. You know, where did they go? Where did they come from? Where did they go? What is the story here? You know, and all that's left of their passage are these marks in the stone.
Yep, and it's this is the other thing Ty and I were talking about is like what happened right after that.
Yeah,
it was 2 hours or a few hours or whatever between the two trips, right? Well, something very soon after that covered those tracks.
Right.
No other animals trampled them, destroyed them. No floods.
They were preserved.
They were preserved.
By
that was it's like the only thing I can conclude from that is like, okay, well, this was the last few hours before something happened that completely covered this whole playa and all the footprints and preserved them forever.
Yeah. And something just had happened before that drained the lake.
Exactly.
because it was still muddy. I mean, so it couldn't have been that long. Wow. Man. Yeah, that's a lot to think about right there.
Flawlessly editing long pauses where I'm choking up reading news stories. Brothers of the Serpent podcast. And we're back. Are we going to do some listener communications?
Yeah, I got 2 emails.
All right.
So, just 2 this week, and then both of them are slightly long, but it's okay. And then we'll get back into the book. We're doing the Velikovsky Heresies by Laird Scranton. This first email is called I Had a Dream by Doru. It says, salutations. I've been meaning to send you guys an email for a long time, but never managed the time or mood to actually do it. In any case, like all the others before me, I want to start by thanking you for all of your work, research, and initiative to take part in the discussion. You are actively changing the world as we know it through your work here, Cosmographia, and by managing to build a community with like-minded people that are interested in knowledge and seeking the truth behind everything surrounding us. These thanks are extended to the entire snake family, the Watchers, and the Snake Force, as we can now satisfy our psychological craving for not feeling alone and being part of something greater.
Wow, man.
Yeah, that's really cool. But there's only one Watcher. Just gonna say. There's no such thing as Watchers. Why have I decided to finally send an email? Last night, I had a dream with a phone. When I woke up, I immediately was thinking about Russ's interesting point about not using phones in our dreams. So it happened. I won't bore you all with all the details, but the TLDR is that I agreed with a friend that he'd give me a ride back home. So I took out the phone from my pocket and messaged him. I don't think I recognized the model of the phone, only that it was black, but I could see the screen. The image was a bit blurry, but I could make out that I was writing to him on the screen keyboard and sent him 2 phrases in a Facebook Messenger type application. I do not remember the exact words I sent because, like it usually happens with dreams, the idea is transmitted without having to materialize it into words or text.
Yes.
I do remember the idea, though. I was basically asking him where he was. I also remember I did not see him reading or acknowledging my messages, like on WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. So I wanted to call him. The strange thing is that I did not open up my contacts to search for him and initiate the call, but a screen appeared like he was calling me instead, although it felt like I initiated this action.
Huh.
If this makes sense. I clearly remember that there was an Android-like circle with some red and green arrows that were pointing to the swipe directions for rejecting or accepting the call. I accepted the call that I initiated, and then I spoke with him. His voice was filtered like through a GSM transmission, and he told me something about his car. Anyway, I don't want to make this email longer than it needs to be, but thank you for taking the time to read it. Maybe I'll write another email sometime in the future to give you a bit of insight into Romanian folklore and myth, as it is also full of sacred numbers and interesting links, as expected, to older civilizations. So warm regards and cheers from Transylvania. Holds up a pint of blood from Dory.
Ah, yes. Salutations.
Man, that's great. And yeah, the phone dreams are interesting how they...
That's perfect, man.
Yeah.
I need to call this guy. Yes.
Yes.
I will accept the call that I just made.
Did. Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly the way it happens.
From Transylvania. Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, we'd love to hear about the Romanian folklore and with the sacred numbers and links to older civilizations. That's fantastic. And thanks for sending the email about the dream. That's great. All right, this one is from Kevin, a.k.a. Bucks Mulder. The Bucks Mulder is his name in the Discord. He says, "Greetings, snakes. This has been building in my overly expanded brain case for several months now. Since the propagandemic, I have been going deeper into a daily, or trying anyway, practice of breath work, yoga, and meditation. Overall, I've been receiving the benefits of better posture, lowered anxiety, and a less reactive mind state. In the past few months, I've explored a few different techniques for meditation, and a document popped up in my searches on, oddly enough, CIA.gov. The article is a breakdown of the Army's experiment with the Monroe Institute and the Gateway Experience. And he gives a link here to the CIA.gov library reading room document on this. It's a PDF. He says, the Gateway Experience is interesting. I did it for a couple of weeks, but I backed off after some strange occurrences. The combination of directed meditation and binaural beats is very effective. And I did entertain contacting you guys with your audio experience with the idea of creating some guided meditation tracks for the Snake Force. The Gateway Experience has a very quick progression, and I think a slower progression into that ether region on the mind is probably a bit safer. But I digress. The most interesting part of the abstract on CIA.gov is the description of the heart/brainwave, an oscillation that tunes the mind to the Schumann frequency. This is achieved through long-term meditation practice, or you can take a shortcut and use binaural beats. This reference to tapping the Schumann frequency suddenly flashed across my mind like a lightning bolt. The Great Pyramid is a giant Schumann frequency amplifier. The installation of fans into the star tunnels is now stopping this from happening, as it is interrupting that natural process. This mind lightning then started arcing across the vast archive of ancient civilization mainframes. There is a room in the Hypogeum that has this same function. The Mayans would meet with their gods in these underground spaces. Tibetan monks wall themselves off in caves for months and years at a time, and I'm seeing a connection here. I know you guys have a tendency to try to keep your feet firmly in the science realm, which I respect wholeheartedly. I have an associate's degree in engineering, but science keeps building walls it doesn't want to look over, and saying it has answers rather than more questions. I'm not saying you guys are scriptards. Skepticism is super important. I've had far too many experiences in unexplored realms to ignore the deeper nature of this place. The most profound of these experiences brought me from atheist to Gnostic in one night. From cross-time connections, premonitions, dreams outside of time, and even what some might term an alien encounter. Regardless of the plethora of experiences, I am still not a card-carrying member of MUFON or anything. I am more of the opinion that the real nature of our reality is much more vast than we have techniques for examining currently. I also have some interesting takes on the Anunnaki and the nature of God Kings. On more recent note, in the last episode, you guys talked about the presence of gold in the universe, if indeed it is generated by neutron stars colliding, and astronomers have actually viewed this occurrence. Then, judging by our short history of attempting to view these sorts of things, they are probably occurring like every freaking minute on an astronomical timeline sense.
That's totally possible.
The Velikovsky Heresies has me spinning also. The strange history of Venus has me asking many questions internally. I am a Freemason, and as such, I'm going to have a deeper look into the Masonic books that I have to see if I can find anything of interest regarding this.
Cool.
In closing, I do have to thank you for all the space weather news. Because of your update on the Perseids, I organized an impromptu viewing party with my family. We didn't see a ton of shooting stars, but I pulled out my stepfather's sighting scope and trained it on Saturn and Jupiter, and had everyone taking turns having a peek. My stepfather, who is in his 70s, was blown away. He truly had an out-of-this-world experience, and I have y'all to thank for that. Viewing Saturn's rings and Jupiter's moons brought out a youthful excitement in him that I haven't seen before. By the time the moon came up over the trees, he and I were the only ones left outside, and when we started looking at the moon, he was giddy. Totally a memory I will cherish. Thank you for all the content and continued mental fellowship of ancient inquiry. Snakes! Kevin, a.k.a. Buck Smolder.
Oh, man. Warm and fuzzies.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, it did the same thing for me, too, the whole space weather news thing. I was out there doing the Perseids. I had that camera borrowed. I was taking pictures, and yeah, that was great. So I'm really glad that that happened, man. Awesome.
Yeah, that is cool. Lots of stuff in that email. Careful with that CIA.gov stuff, though, buddy.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff.
And one last mention here. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name. It's spelled X-A-N, so I'll just go with Zan, maybe.
All right.
Yeah, X-A-N. It's Zan3119 on YouTube. He commented on there. I've been seeing your comments, buddy. Keep them coming. And I just want to say, dude, it really touched my heart, man, what you said about the podcast helping you through this hard time in your life. So join the Discord. lots of us have gone through terrible times in our lives, and we're all supportive in there. And, you know, if pyramids and bad dad jokes can help you out, we're here for you, buddy.
Yeah, Russ read that to me too, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. So thank you so much. And
Totally humbling
yes, very humbling.
and amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks so much, man. Hope you keep listening. And let's see, we got Velikovsky.
Oh, wait.
What? Oh, you got to get the beer?
Yeah,
Time for the beer, yeah. All right. So, yes, we are continuing our deep dive into the Velikovsky Heresies by Laird Scranton, book published by Intertraditions. So everybody help us out, prove that our book reports work. Go to the Intertraditions website and buy the book, or go to Amazon and buy the book if you want it on Kindle. Thanks to all of you who have done that, and there will be links in the show notes. So keep doing it. Keep buying the books. So last week we stopped on Chapter 4. I read the very first part of it. Chapter 4 is called Early Predictive Tests of the Theory. And, okay, a couple of other notes before we get started on the book. One is that I made a big deal about Velikovsky saying that, you know, radio waves were coming from Jupiter, and no one was thinking that at the time. And Janus in the Discord rightly pointed out that Tesla had pointed this out a long time before Velikovsky ever did. So I had completely forgotten about that. You're totally right, buddy. And he also said that Marconi did it as well. Marconi's the other radio inventor guy at the same time as Tesla. So yes, that's correct. I guess what I was thinking of is more along the lines of the scientific community was not thinking in that way. But yeah, you're right. Tesla and Marconi had pointed this out much earlier. So I wonder if Velikovsky was aware of their work.
I bet he was.
He probably was. Yeah. It's probably totally possible. So yeah, that was a good correction. And what else? There was something else. I'll think of it later. So
Carbon dioxide on Mars?
Huh? Oh yeah. So I was mentioning the carbon dioxide on Mars, CO2 on Mars. And I said it's something like 90%. It's actually 95%. And the average temperature on Mars is like minus 80 degrees. That's average for the whole planet.
Fahrenheit?
Yeah, minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow. But what you said was you were like, it's too thin. And that's right. That's the correct answer.
Yeah, because
it has nothing to do with content. It's the
right.
pressure.
It's pressure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah. But the other thing that I was looking at was about how are atmospheres maintained on planets that are orbiting a star? This is a question, right? Like, why doesn't the star just blow all the air away? Well, this is the idea of what may have happened to Mars, because Mars should have a thicker atmosphere, but it doesn't have a magnetic field or a strong one.
Yeah, it's a very weak one. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the idea is that maybe a lot earlier in its life, it did have a magnetic field, and it may have had a thicker atmosphere as a result. Venus does not have a magnetic field, and yet it has this incredibly thick atmosphere. How is this possible? If it's been there for billions of years, most of its air should be gone.
Unless there's something going on the surface that's just producing tons of gas.
Yeah. The other thing about, so it is thought that Venus has a very hot, very, 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 very hot. Like the reason it doesn't have, I was trying to read through this. The reason it doesn't have a magnetic field is because its interior is so hot that there can't be a solid core. It's molten all the way through.
The sun?
Huh? What?
The sun has a magnetic field?
Yeah, but it's doing other magnet stuff.
Okay. Plasma magnet stuff.
Yeah. It's doing fusion magnet stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, there's so there must be harmonics going on with temperature, pressure, etc., and magnetism, because I remember reading some of Tesla's, I can't remember if it was in his patents or something it was something he wrote about. He was talking about the magnetic field with iron or something in some kind of engine he was building or something. I think it was a patent. He's talking about how when you get this metal, iron, up to like 600 degrees Fahrenheit, if I remember correctly, it loses its magnetism, right? And then apparently if you keep heating it up, it'll get it back.
It comes back.
So it sounds to me like there's harmonics going on because when you're heating up something, what are you doing? It's said that you're adding energy to it. Well, that's just
you're increasing the vibration.
You're increasing the motion.
Yeah.
In the atoms. So somehow that motion and that resonance of those atoms bouncing against each other, ricocheting off of each other, has some sort of
dampens the magnetic field
resonance, and then it'll get to a certain point, and harmonically, it's unable to somehow align. The electrons can't. It's all chaotic, so they don't align.
Yeah. But if you keep raising the temperature,
they can
eventually it comes back
realign
into
because
alignment.
you get up to a frequency that's a little higher, and then it goes back into harmonics. You can see this on the Chladni plate. I know I always bring up cymatics, but this is something you can clearly observe on a cymatics experiment where you have a frequency, you get to the resonant state, one resonant frequency of the plate, and then boom, you have a pattern that you can see with the medium that you have on there, like whether it's sand or salt or whatever it is. And then as you start raising the frequency, that pattern will sort of dissipate and go back to just
being scattered
noise.
Yeah.
And you keep going up, and then it reaches a new higher harmonic, and boom, you get a new pattern, and the pattern is much more detailed. It's smaller.
Yes.
Right. So maybe this is also happening in the electromagnetic spectrum with heat.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Okay, so I went to NASA's website. I was looking up about Venus's magnetic field. So this is what I found, and this is NASA. So it says, why doesn't Venus have a magnetic field? They say that it's in part because of its slow rotation. One Venusian day is 243 Earth days long. And its predicted lack of internal thermal convection. Any liquid metallic portion of its core could not be rotating fast enough to generate a measurable global magnetic field. So this is making me wonder if, like, how exactly is this magnetic field of these other planets being generated internally, or is it because they're spinning in the presence of the sun's magnetic field?
That's a good question.
Because I always thought it was like an internal thing, like the Earth has a magnetic field because it's got a solid iron core surrounded by a liquid iron core. But if all of that's rotating the same speed, then that isn't going to make a magnetic field. But if it's because it's spinning within the sun's magnetic field.
Yeah, that seems to make a lot of sense because you have induction, right? Mm-hmm. So like you can take a steel screwdriver or something and you don't notice that it's magnetic. It won't pick up screws or something.
Yeah.
But then you take a magnet, and if you just put the magnet close to it, it won't, I mean, it'll try to like stick to the screwdriver, but it won't make the screwdriver magnetic once you remove the magnet. But if you take the magnet and you sit there and
start
rub on it, moving it
yeah.
back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, it will, over time, create magnetism within the steel of the screwdriver. You can then remove the magnet, and the screwdriver will be noticeably magnetic.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that, you got that spinning core, and if you have this magnetic field present nearby because of that motion, that constant motion, maybe it is.
Yeah. And I had read that the reason you do that, you're scraping it with the magnet, is because each time you tap the metal with the magnet, it allows a lot of the atoms to rearrange.
Jiggling.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the abrasion is actually, the vibration is causing it.
Right, yeah. Okay, so.
That's a good point. I wonder if you just got it real close and just moved it back and forth.
Yeah, well, that probably would work too. I don't know, because it is pulling on stuff.
Yeah.
I just don't know. But okay, so continuing with this, NASA says limits on magnetic field strength from Magellan magnetometer data are 0.000015 times the Earth's field. Current theories of the formation and evolution of the terrestrial planets do support an Earth-scale magnetic dipole or magnetic field on Venus for perhaps the first billion years or so after formation. During that time, remnant thermal energy from the heat of creation probably drove the Venusian dynamo. After this heat was fully dissipated, there appear to have been no other internal processes with which to generate the convective motion needed to support a global field. Today, the only magnetic field Venus may have comes from the interaction between Venus's upper atmosphere and the solar wind. This interaction causes electrical currents to flow in the upper atmosphere, which then creates a weak magnetic field that streams behind the planet like a comet's tail. So that's what they say. But when I was reading about all this, it appears that they don't really know.
Yeah, it's just
And then all the ideas about what Venus's internals look like is just, they're all guesses.
yeah. I can hear you, Electric Universe people out there yelling at your device.
Yeah. We can hear you shouting at us. Yeah.
I don't know how that would work either, but it's possible.
Yeah. All right. So back to the book here. So we had ended with Velikovsky considered the likely consequences of his theory and publicly set forth several of what he called advanced claims by which the correctness of his theory could be judged. So, that many of these claims take the form of logical conclusions that can be derived based on the proposed sequence of cosmic events Velikovsky defines in his Worlds in Collision thesis is hard to dispute. Likewise, many of the claims reflect views that ran diametrically against conventional scientific wisdom in 1950. So their odds of ultimately being shown to be true could only be called very slim at the time they were put forth. Still, many scientists who dispute Velikovsky's thesis often tend to view any apparently successful claim of Velikovsky's as a matter of pure luck or simple coincidence. And so, yeah, I'd mentioned this last time that we have to keep in mind that when a lot of times the claims that Velikovsky was making at the time he was making them were incredibly outrageous.
Yeah.
And so to have them be shown to be true much later is very interesting because at the time, no one was thinking. This is why I was trying to point it out with Jupiter and radio waves and stuff. It's like these were considered outrageous claims. Nowadays, we take it for granted, you know?
Yeah.
So,
especially that a large body of his reasoning had to do with ancient texts.
yes, exactly. So, among the predictive claims made by Velikovsky for his scenario, some were given in Worlds in Collision, and others in speeches or articles written after the book was published. As we have suggested, some of these were offered up by Velikovsky as definitive tests of his theory, and so provided a basis upon which his seemingly outrageous claims could be challenged. To begin with, key aspects of Velikovsky's scenario of catastrophe rested on a presumption that the bodies of the solar system must be electrically and magnetically charged, and that electromagnetic effects must play a significant role in these interactions, a view that sharply contradicted mainstream scientific beliefs in 1950. In reaction to these views, in a 1952 book titled In Fads and Fallacies in the Name of Science, author Martin Gardner accused Velikovsky of having invented electromagnetic forces capable of doing precisely what he wants them to do. There is no scientific evidence whatever for the powers of these forces, but so convinced is the hermit scientist that everyone is prejudiced except himself, that he can with a straight face belabor the orthodox for refusing to recognize these imaginary energies. Perhaps the first public vindication of one of Velikovsky's unconventional advanced claims came in response to this very issue. On October 14th, in 1953, at the behest of Princeton geology professor Harry Hammond Hess, Velikovsky addressed the forum of the Graduate College of Princeton University in a lecture titled Worlds in Collision in the Light of Recent Finds in Archaeology, Geology, and Astronomy, Refuted or Verified. And he ended the talk with this statement: the planet Jupiter is cold, yet its gases are in motion. It appears probable to me that it sends out radio noises, as do the sun and the stars, and I suggest that this be investigated.
What does he mean it's cold?
I think that, based on, like, the outer part of it is cold. It is. Yeah, it's cold. Yeah. Its internals are obviously very hot, but... Yeah, I'm not sure what his reasoning is there, but if we could find the text...
I would like to know.
Yeah, if we could find the text of the whole thing, probably
that thing looks cold. It must be emitting radio waves. By what reasoning?
Discussion of the possible importance of electromagnetic effects in the solar system dominated a long-time correspondence between Immanuel Velikovsky and Albert Einstein, which began in 1946 and continued until Einstein's untimely death in 1955. The question of what role electromagnetism might play in the interaction of astronomic bodies had potential bearing on Einstein's search for unified field theory.
Yes.
Nonetheless, Einstein resisted Velikovsky's ideas, even when directly approached by Velikovsky in June of 1954 to use his influence to have Jupiter surveyed for radio emissions, a request that Einstein effectively deflected. But as good fortune or good insight would have it for Velikovsky, soon after, on April 5th of 1955, so less than a year later, two astronomers from the Carnegie Institute, who had no apparent knowledge of Velikovsky's suppositions regarding Jupiter, announced the chance detection of radio signals from Jupiter. With this news, a somewhat embarrassed Einstein reversed his opinion, dropped his resistance to Velikovsky's proposal, and instructed his secretary to authorize, in Einstein's name, any test that Velikovsky might wish to have conducted.
Wow.
And
Good guy.
Yeah. And 13 days later, on April 18th of 1955, Einstein was found dead, the victim of a ruptured aortic aneurysm. At the time of his death, it was reported that the one book found open on his desk was Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision. So.
Holy crap.
I know. My only problem with this part of this book is that, and this may be me completely misremembering something. Kyle's mind is still exploding over here. Is that I feel like I've heard this same... Okay, just that last bit about the book being found open on his desk, about Charles Hapgood's book. I've almost heard that exact same story, which makes me think this is like an urban legend.
Watcher. Wait, who had Charles Hapgood's book?
Like that, I've heard
that
this
Einstein?
almost. Yes, that this exact same thing happened. They were like, it was said that at the time of his death, when he was found dead at his desk, that Charles Hapgood's book was open on his desk. And I'm like, okay, this sounds like urban legendary to me.
Dig deep, Watcher.
I'm not sure if I'm remembering that correctly, but I remember when I was reading through this book the first time, I'm like, and this is nothing against Laird Scranton. I'm not saying that he's talking crap. I'm just saying that, like, I feel like I've heard this exact same thing about Hapgood's book.
Okay.
Because Hapgood and Einstein were supposedly also in communication, and Einstein also died before he could really, you know, there's a very similar story happening here, and that doesn't mean that they didn't both happen. Einstein was in communication with a lot of people, and this is interesting too. Jeff, the curator of the Library of the Serpent, just gave us a link that Kyle and I are going to go through before the next show, which contains the communications, the correspondence between Velikovsky and Einstein. So we'll dig into this.
Yeah, for sure.
And we'll have more reports on it for the next time we do when we do part 3. But yeah, so I don't want to call this into question, but I feel like I've heard this same story about the book being open on Einstein's desk for somebody else's book. I'm just, So yeah, I could be totally wrong. I didn't have time to look it up, but maybe the Watcher can find out. But I do. This is really interesting.
It is similar to also the Tesla situation where, like, he dies and then they come in there and a couple of guys like show up and they take something from his safe and it's like,
yeah. There's
the last thing he was working on.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
But doesn't mean that it's not true.
Right.
What these connections.
Yeah. The key part to me.
Dude, I mean, I often have multiple books open. I mean, he could have had both of those guys' books on his desk.
Yes, that's right. I've definitely had many books open before. If somebody they were like, Russ had 14 books open on his desk.
Yeah, I mean, he's looking at Velikovsky, he's looking at Hapgood.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's making comparisons. Right.
I've had both of those books going in my reader before.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he's reading both books. Yeah, there you go. But to me, the key part about this was the that Velikovsky was asking Einstein to have this study done on Jupiter, and Einstein was like, yeah, he's like, you got interesting ideas, guy, but, I'm kind of busy over here trying to figure out the universe. And then less than a year later, somebody announces this discovery, and Einstein's are like, okay, let's take, and then he tells us
whatever that guy wants,
whatever he wants, let's do it.
Yeah,
that's cool. Really cool. Yeah, whether the book was open on his desk when he died or not. But it is also interesting that he makes that decision, and then 13 days later, that's where my conspiracy guy comes out.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah, multiple books open.
Brett's showing us a picture of Einstein's desk. Is that what that is, Brett? Yeah, I can't tell. The desk the day after Einstein died. That's supposedly the picture from Life magazine. I can't tell which book that is, but yes, there's lots of papers and books.
Yeah.
All right. So, also, back to the book here. In 1952, Donald Menzel of Harvard University spoke up to dispute Velikovsky's claims regarding electromagnetism in the sun, purporting that the sun was incapable of holding a charge sufficient to satisfy Velikovsky's model. But 8 years later, in 1960, Professor V.A. Bailey of the University of Sydney, Australia, demonstrated, again, without apparent knowledge of Velikovsky's proposal, that the sun carries a net charge precisely sufficient to meet Velikovsky's unorthodox claims. Closely related to Velikovsky's suggestion that electromagnetism must play a significant role in dynamics within the solar system, also proposed by Velikovsky in the same speech to students at Princeton in October of 1953, was the suggestion that Earth must exert a magnetic influence that extends out into space as far as the moon. And he further outlined this idea in a 1956 memorandum to the American Committee for the International Geophysical Year that was submitted to the committee by Hesch, the receipt of which was acknowledged by the committee. And a few years later, in 1958, James Van Allen announced and was ultimately credited with the discovery of the magnetosphere. Van Allen was he was that belt maker?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He put belts around spaceships.
That's right.
Kept them on the ground.
Yeah, so I guess the key here, again, what Laird is pointing out is all these times where Velikovsky said, well, this will happen, and nobody was thinking in that direction. Yeah. And then very soon after, a few years later, somebody comes out with this discovery that turns out to be ground shaking and now is a foundational part of our understanding of astrophysics in the solar system.
It's crazy.
Yeah. All right. Take a break.
Snakes!
History the way you wish it was taught, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Brothers of the Serpent podcast. We have the Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Coprolite Studies, where there are no degrees. Only certificates of ignorance that you have to print yourself or make them with crayons or dust off the old typewriter. And we are doing a deep dive into Laird Scranton's The Velikovsky Heresies, published by Intertraditions. So check out the show notes, visit Intertraditions' website, buy the book. This is a fantastic book. I can't possibly read all of it. I'm skipping huge sections of it that are very important for all the details, but of course, we're just trying to get the highlights here, like we usually do in our deep dives. So yes, you definitely need to get the book to get the full story, because it is excellent. All right, so we were just talking about Einstein and Velikovsky, and then James Van Allen, who announced the discovery of the magnetosphere in 1958, which is, let's see, that would be 5 years after Velikovsky gave a speech at Princeton suggesting that the Earth's magnetic field extended as far into space as the moon. Okay, so another early prediction of Velikovsky's in regards to Venus, presented in the final chapter of Worlds in Collision and offered as a definitive test of his theory, was that if Venus were a relatively new astronomic body that had blazed brightly and had rivaled the sun in brightness in the daytime sky, according to some ancient sources, then it must be found to be still quite hot, nearly molten, according to Velikovsky. At the time of this statement, the clouded surface of Venus was known to be minus 25 degrees Celsius on both the day and night sides. So Velikovsky's view could hardly have been called a safe bet based on the then conventional wisdom. Nonetheless, in support of Velikovsky and in contradiction to the prevailing astronomic view, late in 1962 and early in 1963, the Mariner 2 probe showed that the actual surface temperature of Venus to be about 460 degrees Celsius, which is 800 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to melt lead. As a consequence of these early points of seeming vindication for Velikovsky, at around this same time, one of the few public acts of professional recognition for Velikovsky's correct predictions occurred. Two leading academics wrote a letter to Science magazine to acknowledge Velikovsky's priority on these points and to urge that his other conclusions be objectively reconsidered. This in spite of their own stated misgivings about Velikovsky's broader theories. So that's good, you know. Despite all of the, you know, the skirp tardiness of science, there are still, throughout the story, you see good scientists popping up and saying, all right, we still don't know about buying all of his stuff, but dang, he's been right on a bunch of these things that nobody thought, in ways that nobody thought were right. So we should look at his other stuff. I like that.
That's cool.
As another consequence of Venus's proposed erratic history as a rogue astronomic body and its theoretic interactions with Earth and Mars, Velikovsky suggested that Venus would be found to have an anomalous rotation when compared with the other planets in the system. In late 1962, ground-based observations from the Goldstone Tracking Station in California and the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory in Washington showed that Venus, unlike other planets, had a slow retrograde rotation. Moreover, in April 1966, it was shown that Venus's rate of rotation exhibited a resonance with the rotation of the Earth, such that every time Venus passes between the Sun and the Earth at a point which is called the inferior conjunction, Venus always shows the same side to Earth.
Gosh.
Much as the Moon continually presents its same side to Earth during its monthly orbit. Of course, as with almost any scientific observation, there is a very small chance that this type of apparent resonance could simply be a matter of grand coincidence. Alternately, such resonance might be explained by tidal forces of gravity if it could be shown that the orbits of Venus and Earth were close enough to one another to be significantly affected by gravitational tidal forces. On the other hand, this type of classic resonance is also known to result from the close approach of two astronomic bodies. Similar to the approaches proposed by Immanuel Velikovsky to have occurred between Venus and Earth. So that kind of...
Gonna be using that button a lot.
Right. This one blew my mind too. It's the same thing with Mars. Right? No, okay, not quite the same. Mars doesn't show the same face, I don't believe, but there's this 15-year resonance with Mars and Earth. But what's interesting is that Venus's close approach to Earth, when it's at its inferior conjunction, when it's between the Earth and the Sun, the same face is always facing us. Yeah. How is this possible?
Yeah, that's crazy. I wonder what the conjunctions between Venus and Jupiter are, or between Venus and Mars.
Yeah.
Like if it, you know, had multiple encounters, are there still resonance between those bodies?
Right. That's a good question. That is a good question.
Which we won't, that would be a lot harder to figure out, obviously.
Yeah. So despite these seeming successes, most scientists remain wary of offering public support to Velikovsky. Even one of Velikovsky's most steadfast friends, Harry Hammond Hess, I'm not sure how to say it, then chairman of the Space Board of the National Academy of Science, wrote the following to Velikovsky in 1963. Quote, "We are philosophically miles apart because basically we do not accept each other's form of reasoning, logic. I am, of course, quite convinced of your sincerity, and I also admire the vast fund of information which you have painstakingly acquired over the years. I am not about to be converted to your form of reasoning, though it certainly has had successes. You have, after all, predicted that Jupiter would be a source of radio noise, that Venus would have a high surface temperature, that the sun and bodies of the solar system would have large electrical charges, and several other such predictions. Some of these predictions were said to be impossible when you made them. All of them were predicted long before proof that they were correct came to hand. Conversely, I do not know of any specific prediction you made that has since been proven to be false. I suspect the merit lies in that you have a good basic background in the natural sciences and you are quite uninhibited by the prejudices and probability taboos which confine the thinking of most of us. Whether you are right or wrong, I believe you deserve a fair hearing." Unquote. So yeah, he basically, after saying, you got all this stuff right, and I'm not aware of you ever being proven wrong, but I still don't believe your bullshit. But people should listen to you anyway. It's great. Okay, so Chapter 5. Later developments in the controversy. Interest in Velikovsky and his book, Worlds in Collision, resurfaced in July of 1969 with the first manned moon landing. In response to an invitation by the New York Times, Velikovsky wrote a summary of his expectations of what would be found to be true about the moon based on the Apollo missions. This is great. They're like baiting him. Like, come on, guy, give us some predictions here. You're so good at this, right? And he's like, all right, here you go. And he gives him a whole bunch of stuff. He listed 9 specific claims, including his belief that remnant magnetism would be found on the moon, that the surface of the moon would exhibit a steep thermal gradient, that radioactive hotspots would be found, and that the moon would be shown to suffer from frequent moonquakes. And all of these predictions eventually proved to be true.
Wow. How did he do this?
By what wizardry? In 1974, the American Association for the Advancement of Science proposed a gathering in San Francisco that was promoted as a direct debate between Velikovsky and one of his most vocal critics, the well-known popularizer of science, astronomer Carl Sagan. Sagan had been a former researcher and lecturer at Harvard University and was the associate director of the Center for Radio Physics and Space Research at Cornell University. This event, which has since been the focus of several books on the Velikovsky controversy, is largely remembered as the final public refutation of Velikovsky and his theories. And since then, most traditional astronomers have considered his theories and the uncomfortable questions they raised to effectively be closed issues. So they go out and get their big gun, basically.
Yeah.
They get this guy who is like a science star, a popular
science communicator
guy, very bright, written lots of books. I mean, Sagan was cool, but Sagan pulled out all of the skirp-tard tactics on Velikovsky. And they did it, at this, I don't know what you would call it, a symposium or something. And since then, they've been able to say, like, oh yeah, Sagan just destroyed him, basically. But what's funny is that as we go through in the book, you find out that actually no, and a lot of Sagan's arguments against Velikovsky, Sagan was saying things like, this is so astronomically unlikely, or that if that was the case, then this would be the case, and that's ridiculous. And those things are found out to actually that is the case, and that thing is happening. But people still just like, yeah, Sagan destroyed him in that debate. And it's because Sagan was attacking him on things they didn't know about yet, and basically doing things like, I haven't watched this or read the transcript or whatever, but you go through and you see like Sagan what he was doing was picking things from Velikovsky's ideas, okay, that nobody had been able to test yet, and then running through what that would mean for
everything else.
Yeah, for the scenario and the situation, that would be the Jupiter's core has to be this ridiculously high temperature, and nobody But it is that temperature, actually. Hotter than that, actually. It's just at the time, they didn't know that. So, let's see. Other critiques of Velikovsky's scholarship have been published, some of which also criticize his use of quoted material, and others that question his interpretation of various ancient texts and myths. So this is very what happens to Sitchin, right? Yeah. They criticize his use of quoted material from other people's papers or other people's translation, and then they're like, wow, your interpretations are bullshit, you know, but they say he's translating it wrong. No, he's got his interpretation. He's using other people's translations.
Right.
But Velikovsky was a good scholar of this kind of stuff. But anyway, one frequent complaint of casual students of mythology in regard to Velikovsky arises out of an apparent confusion between very early references in ancient Greek mythology to Athena, a likely surrogate for the Egyptian mother goddess Neith or Nath, and variant Greek myths that define Pallas Athena as the daughter of Zeus, and who was said to have sprung from the head of Zeus. So this is the confusion about Venus and Athena and like who actually, you know, I guess this is saying that this is a complaint of casual students of mythology. That in other words, to find this connection, you have to look deeper into the more ancient myths and find the connection that goes back to the Egyptian connections. Okay, which is true. It confused me too. You know, this like, wait a minute, is Venus Venus is clearly the one that's born. Velikovsky says to find the Venus goddess, you look through all the mythologies and just find the one who was born into the pantheon. Right. But the Greeks changed names at some point, or the connection isn't as clear. So I guess what Laird is saying here is that there is a connection. It's just harder to find if you're just a casual student of mythology. So among the scientific arguments consistently raised against the scenario presented in Worlds in Collision is the view that the various changes in motion required of Venus and Mars seem to violate basic principles of celestial mechanics. This Randall has said this.
Yeah.
Astronomers argue that had Venus once been a comet, as Velikovsky claims, it would be unreasonable to think that its orbit could have circularized in only a few thousand years. It is also argued that, given the types of recent upheaval proposed by Velikovsky, we should see the evidence of recent disturbance in the orbits of Mars and the Moon. Some astronomers argue that the close encounter of two astronomic bodies tends to greatly incline the orbit of one of the bodies, and yet none of the planetary orbits involved seem to have become inclined. This notwithstanding the fact that Venus exhibits the most inclined orbit of any of the planets. So even though it's very circular, it is inclined. It's tilted.
Tilted, yeah.
It's just not much, but it is the most inclined of all of them, except for Pluto, I assume, but Pluto is not a planet anymore. In truth, close encounters between astronomic bodies of significantly different sizes tend to incline the orbit of the smaller body.
Yeah.
In Velikovsky's scenario, Venus and Earth are very nearly the same size, so an encounter may well not have resulted in any dramatic inclination of orbit, while Venus and Mars are said to have actually impacted one another, not simply made a close approach. So he doesn't address the problem of circularity here.
Right.
Yeah, because the first thing he says is astronomers argue that if Venus had once been a comet, it would be unreasonable to think that its orbit could have circularized in only a few thousand years.
Right, rather than being highly elliptical.
Right. Then he moves on to the problem of inclination.
Yeah.
Then he addresses that. So the inclination problem has been addressed, but what about the circularity?
Yep. More than one body? Like if it's a comet and maybe it breaks up and large chunks of it interact, and then it interacts with itself after that, right?
Yes. Yeah, and Velikovsky did say that this is one of the things that Carl Sagan tried to put. Maybe I can't remember if I marked this or not, but one of the arguments Carl Sagan made was like any collision like this that made a giant thing like Venus would also make a whole bunch of small stuff. And Velikovsky's like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, guy. And you can see the declining reports of cometary bodies in the skies from ancient times to now. And he's like, yeah, it made a lot of small
fell
stuff.
into the sun, most of them.
Yeah.
Probably.
And there, he was counting Venusian objects, which are, I'm sorry, not Venusian, Jupiter, Jovian
objects.
crossing comets, or whatever they're called. The ones that are in the within the Jovian orbit are being affected by Jupiter. These would be the ones that were generated during the Venus event. Now, the circularization of Venus's orbit, I don't know.
And what
The first thing I want to point out, though, is that Venus gets because the first thing I would, what happens to me, this is what happens to me when I think about this, because I'm thinking celestial mechanics. And I have to remember that I'm not thinking of a rogue object coming out of the solar system and joining the solar system. Venus, because that one would have a hugely inclined, very elliptical and strange orbit, and it would take it forever to circularize and join the plane of the ecliptic.
Yeah.
Venus gets to start from a regular circular orbit of Jupiter. That's the first key. Jupiter does have a nice, regular, in the plane of the ecliptic, not inclined orbit that's circular, right? Venus starts from there. So yeah,
so something else that was possibly highly elliptical, tilted to the plane of the ecliptic, impacts Jupiter, and then what comes out is following more in Jupiter's path. Is that what you're trying to
because
say?
it's got Jupiter's momentum and motion.
Yeah.
It's just getting a little nudge, basically, and it has to be this precise nudge, because there's this very small window where it has escape velocity from Jupiter, but will not escape the sun. There's a kind of a tiny window there.
There's also what was the story about the objects that are in Jupiter's orbit that are sort of like ghost objects? They're following Jupiter, and they're also ahead of Jupiter.
Yeah,
and they're in these Lagrange
points. Yeah.
And there's some pretty large chunks. I remember reading a story about it a while back, that they're discovering new ones. They're like, oh my God, there's some pretty massive things following Jupiter around and leading it.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's a lot more stuff out there, in other words.
Yeah, I don't know how it would circularize, but I think Velikovsky was... This is kind of like, where did the water come from for your flood?
Yeah.
That's how I view it. Velikovsky
probability calculations.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is just extremely
right.
probable.
Velikovsky is saying, here's what I see in the ancient texts. Here's a possible translation of it, or here's a possible interpretation of the ideas. All of these pantheons from all over the world have a new goddess that appears from the destruction of an old goddess interacting with an old god, right? Then this new goddess wreaks havoc all over the place.
Drives one of the other gods crazy.
Yeah. And then eventually joins the pantheon.
Yeah.
As a regular.
Grows up. Becomes an adult.
Right. Stops being. Yeah. And so he's saying, like, could this be a planetary story? Sitchin did this.
Yep. I love it.
And they got mad at him, right? I'm just saying that questioning the probability of this happening is not. I mean, yes, you want to look for the mechanics, but but don't just dismiss it, I guess, is the point.
And why couldn't an object come in on the plane of the ecliptic? I mean, it's highly improbable, but I mean, look at the Oort cloud.
Yeah.
It's everywhere in every plane.
Right.
Right. I mean, there's so much of it out there.
Yeah. And this brings up the question of the solar system itself. So one of the things, I pop into the Discord a lot of times during these book reports, and I ask people, you guys got questions or whatever, post them in here. And one of the questions got posted was, can you guys talk about the circularity of all the rest of the planets, and how does this work? Why are they circular? How stable is this system? And the answer is no one knows.
Yeah.
Because what happens is we look at it right now and we're like, all right, we seem to have this kind of stable, everything's sort of circular system. There's some oddities. Pluto is weird. Venus is spinning the wrong way, or it's upside down, however you want to say it. One of Saturn's moons is, maybe it's not Saturn, one of Neptune, one of the outer planet's moons is going the wrong way around the planet. It's retrograde orbit. So there's some weird stuff. But in general, the system is stable looking. The orbits are pretty round. And nothing is in danger of running into anything else. But the problem is that it's an in-body system, which means this is a thing in physics and chaos math. I was looking into this, trying to understand it. I don't understand it, but the problem is there's a whole bunch of bodies, the sun plus all the planets plus all their moons plus all the other little things, and everything is exerting little gravitational pulls on everything else all the time. So a two-body system is easy to figure out. You can model it. People have proven it, and the fastest mathematical way to deal with a two-body system is assume one is fixed, and then you can deal with the other one going around it.
Right.
Even if they're both moving all over the place, you can model the orbit of the other one just by having one be fixed.
Yeah.
As soon as you put three bodies in there, though, it gets complicated, and the math gets really tough. An in-body system meaning however many bodies, right? In being number, just however many. And in the solar system, there's a lot. More than just all the planets, all the moons as well. You run into this problem where, and Newton dealt with this in his celestial mechanics, and he was pointing out in his book, he's like, yeah, so I get 3 points on the planet's orbit, and then I start running all these calculations, and then I check my calculations a couple of months later, and I'm way off. And it's because they're all exerting these little forces on each other all the time, and those forces are incredibly complicated.
And they add up over time.
Yes, that's right. So this is an in-body problem in physics. It's a known thing. And as far as we know right now, at least I was looking this up, and it's like an in-body problem cannot be solved. It can't be solved. So what that means effectively is that our models of our own solar system start from now, at time equals 0, now, the present time. And as you go backwards in time modeling them or forwards in time and modeling, they become chaos. So we can't even, you can't even show going backwards in time how the solar system has remained stable throughout history because the in-body problem makes it impossible to model.
Yep. Makes sense.
So the question when you say, why is our solar system stable now, is we don't know, because you assume you got to have a kind of a stable system to arrive at this point. Now, obviously things can run into each other and stuff, but so we know there was chaos. There was probably some chaos at the beginning. Any system start, but how did it become stable? And how long has it been that way? And how long does it stay that way?
I got to take a video of this. Kind of going back to wine here, but the fine lees in the bottom of this glass wine jug I have. Like I have to stir it up every now and again.
Yeah.
And the last time I did it, I stirred it up just barely. Because I saw it when I stirred it up rapidly. I saw the lees pick up on the bottom and make this really cool formation. Then bam, it became just opaque.
Yeah,
the whole
cloudy
jar, right? So in the second one, I stirred it a little bit and waited, and then I saw the lees at the bottom pick up and start to make this beautiful pattern. And it actually did this repeating thing where I don't even know how to describe this. That's why I'm going to have to take a video of it next time. But it made this very nice little tornado-looking thing, right, that rose up. And then suddenly that whole tornado sort of inverted on itself and made a funnel that then got it all erratic or whatever. And then it kind of was a little crazy for a little while, and then it sort of became a nice, stable-looking funnel again. And then another inverted funnel just formed on the bottom and it did this over and over and over and over again, where it looked like, okay, it's totally predictable what it's going to continue doing here. And then it just does this crazy thing, and then that stirs into all of it, and then it becomes looking like it's predictable again.
Yeah, so in the wider context, that cyclical progression is predictable.
That, exactly, yes. So I'm thinking about the solar system, and right now we're in this Holocene period of relative calm compared to what we can find in the ice cores and all this kind of stuff, looking back through long periods of what looked like must have been crazy catastrophic stuff. And then you look at the solar system, it's like, well, everything's pretty round and everything's pretty circular and it's all on the same plane.
Yeah. Good point.
So it may be just like that. Like when you fast forward this thing, you see this nice rounded thing, and then it all sort of gets chaotic and whoa, what is happening? And then it goes back to being round and nice and circular. And
there you go. And so when I was looking at the in-body problem as it relates to the solar system itself, what all the articles and things I was reading, the papers and the abstracts were telling me was that models of the solar system in human terms, it's stable and we don't have to worry about anything. But they're saying that when they modeled the solar system, once you get between 10 and 50 million years out in any direction, forward or past, it becomes chaos.
Man, that's really...
Now they're saying that can't be right.
It's making me sad. But I guess like because I immediately thought of like what we do with stellarium, all this stuff we do with stellarium.
Yeah.
Like think about the Orion correlation.
Yeah.
Right. We're taking stellarium and all of this, the time equals 0 stuff that we know right now, and then we're reversing the clock and we're going back and then we're saying, the stars line up and it mirrors but that's only 12,000 years, right?
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah.
So maybe it's still fairly accurate. I don't know. But of course, you throw in the idea that Venus just came out and caused all this chaos. And this is what, 3000 BC or something? 4000
1500 BC is what he was saying.
1500
1500, and then Mars starts going crazy around 750. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
we're talking
really recent.
Yeah, 3,500 years ago.
Which cast doubt on the whole idea of being able to just jump into Stellarium and back things up and take a look and see if it's... And
the ancient records of Venus. You back Stellarium up to... you don't even have to go back that far. You back Stellarium up and what they're doing is taking our current models and just rolling them backwards.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, because of the in-body problem, we don't know how stable the system is over long periods of time, like geologically long periods of time.
That'd be really interesting to do. Like of course, Velikovsky didn't have this capability, but you're looking at these ancient astronomers and they're saying they're out there doing observations and they're making observations of these stars.
Yeah.
And so you can reverse the clock on Stellarium, and you say, okay, yeah, there's those 2 planets that they're talking about, and Venus is like, bam, like super bright right there. They don't even talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy.
And solar eclipses that don't exist.
Yeah.
When we roll our models back, there's all these records of solar eclipses that our models don't show. They're like, there was no solar eclipses anywhere on the Earth, and yet there's Chinese records that say had really good astronomers that were saying there were solar eclipses that were happening out in the ocean. They weren't seeing them themselves. They were just doing their own calculations. Those solar eclipses didn't take place, according to our models of our current system. And the other thing I was thinking of is, like, why does the moon, its orbit does this wobbling thing?
Yeah.
That 18-year cycle.
Yep.
Okay. Back in the book. We're getting close here to the break.
Yeah,
so,
Matt, you were talking about the lunar maximum...
Yes.
And minimum.
And the watcher posted up here, Triton. That's right. Triton orbits Neptune in what is known as a retrograde orbit. It orbits Neptune in a direction opposite the planet's rotation.
So it's right on the plane of the planet's rotation.
Yeah. It orbits Neptune is spinning counterclockwise like everything else, but Triton is going around it the wrong way.
Okay. Yeah. Because I was wanting to know what's the that thing's orbit in reference to the plane of the ecliptic. How elliptic, or not elliptical, but how tilted is it?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I assumed that it was probably in the planet's own equatorial region, right? That's usually where the big moons end up.
Yeah.
But that's, I don't know.
Yep. Need to know more.
Yeah, and supposedly that is tearing Triton apart. For some reason, no one really, I've seen this modeled and people are showing and talking about it, that Triton is known to have it's got these jets. It's like icy, and there's these constant jets coming out, and they're saying that's because its retrograde orbit around this planet that's spinning the other direction is constantly doing weird stuff to its internals and cracking its surface and spewing jets of material out into space.
Wow. So if I wonder if that's the same for the solar system as a whole. Like if a comet comes in,
it's going the wrong way.
In the solar system,
it's
going to start blowing up and doing more crazy stuff than one that comes in going the direction of everything else.
Yeah, if you're talking about
because we're all going the direction the sun's rotating.
Yeah. So if you view the solar system from the point of view of the sun's north pole, so you're at the north pole of the sun looking down, and you back way out so you can see the whole solar system.
You see the ice caps on the sun's north pole.
Yeah, the ice caps on the sun's north pole. All the planets are going counterclockwise.
Yeah.
Right. And spinning counterclockwise as well. And all their moons are going around them counterclockwise. And all those moons are spinning counterclockwise.
Except Venus and that one moon.
Venus is not doing it right. And Triton is not doing it right.
So weird.
Yeah. And I've always thought of it, if you think of the standard model theories of the way the solar system formed, in other words, there's a big gas nebula, and that whole nebula is spinning.
How does this happen if that's the case?
Yeah, it's a disc shape. The whole thing is spinning in that direction, so everything should end up spinning and rotating. It's all the planets you can view as little whirlpools in this big whirlpool. How do you end up with stuff going the wrong direction? Only by large outside forces acting on them. Okay. Break time.
Mystery not solved. Same mystery. Brothers of the Serpent podcast, showing the same face at every inferior conjunction with you, the audience. And swiping around with the Electric Universe badminton racket here in the cube, taking care of all insect intrusions flawlessly.
Right. All of the flying armored aliens that are in here.
Thank you, Wishon.
That's right. Okay. So, back to the book, Velikovsky Heresies by Laird Scranton. Some geologists have argued that had Venus wreaked chaos on Earth around 1500 BCE, as Velikovsky claims, we should see evidence of the event in global ice cores, purporting that no such evidence exists. C. Leroy Ellenberger writes, the terminal Cretaceous event, 65 million years ago, whatever it was, left unambiguous worldwide signatures of iridium and soot. The catastrophes Velikovsky conjectured within the past 3,500 years left no similar signatures according to Greenland ice cores, bristlecone pine rings, Swedish clay varves, and ocean sediments. All provide accurately datable sequences covering the relevant period and preserve no signs of having experienced a Velikovskyan catastrophe. However, contrary to this statement, there can be little doubt of extensive worldwide evidence, since the evidence does in fact exist, of a major catastrophe at the very time Velikovsky claims, which is traditionally attributed to the many volcanic eruptions of that period. Without regard to the possibility that those eruptions could have been caused by a theoretic catalyzing agent. Which is kind of what some of what the Comet Research Group is going through here, right? Volcanism at the time period. And the standard model is trying to blame stuff on volcanism.
Yes. But what is the cause?
Yeah.
Volcanism. Yeah, so the tidal forces definitely, I mean...
Yeah. There's no impact. There's not going to be any iridium.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, just what the moon does.
Yeah.
It's pretty serious.
Mm-hmm. In an environmental geology article, P.E. Lemoreau, I don't know how to say it, writes, the eruptions of Thera, or Santorini, between 1628 and 1450 BC constituted a natural catastrophe unparalleled in all of history. There had to be massive loss of life from ejected gases, volcanic ash, bombs, and flows. At distant points in Asia Minor and Africa, there were darkness from ash fallout, lightning, and destructive earthquakes. Earthquake waves emanating from the epicenter near the ancient volcano were felt as far away as the Norwegian countries. Volcanic ash spread upwards as a pillar of fire and clouds. into the atmosphere and blocked out the sun for many days. The ash reached the stratosphere and moved around the world, where the associated gases and fine particulate matter impacted the atmosphere's soils and waters. Climatic changes were the aftermath of the eruption, and the atmospheric plume was to eventually affect the bristlecone pine of California, the bog oaks of Ireland and England and Germany, and the grain crops of China. So in the previous statement, the guy was like, there's no evidence in the bristlecone pines and in the ice cores. But yes, there is evidence. They just is like, we know what this is. This is volcanoes.
Right.
But he wants it to be this
exogenic source.
Right. He wants it to be the same. He's pointing out, the guy was making the comparison to the KT event, which was a definite impact, which is going to have a different signature with lots of iridium and other stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's wrong. There is evidence of a worldwide catastrophe at the time. It just, he was trying to do this weird association with something that isn't the same mechanism, is what I'm saying, and what Laird is saying. So extensive arguments have been made against the idea that a close approach of Venus or Mars could have changed either the rotation of Earth or the tilt of its axis, as Velikovsky proposes. However, a 2002 study of possible causes of the ice ages cites arguments in favor of just such gravitationally induced changes in the tilt of the axis as a way to explain both the types of ice and patterns of glaciation that are observed to accrue during ice ages. The author of this study presents graphs of the measurable gravitational perturbations that are known to occur, even today from a great distance, whenever Venus and Earth come into conjunction with one another. These cause the orbit of Earth to slow somewhat as the planets approach each other. He argues that the precessional effect of this type of interaction might be enough to induce long-term changes in the tilt of the axis of the Earth. Clearly, these same effects acting from a much closer distance might theoretically have done the same and to a greater extent.
Wow, so when they come into their minor conjunction, that time when they're
closest,
when Venus is showing the same phase, they're actually affecting each other's rotation,
right,
around their each own
axis.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this guy is saying that could have long-term consequences for the tilt of Earth's axis over time.
Wow.
Because it's causing a precessional effect.
We've always wondered about this idea of the nod.
Yeah.
Right? Like this nod that the standard model idea is that it goes back and forth.
Yeah.
But maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
We were talking about this before.
Venus just keeps tilting it further and further and further.
And then it flips over.
All right.
Outrageous claims.
Outrageous claims. Let's see. Let's skip some stuff here. Okay, so chapter 6, Venus in Ancient Times. Because Venus is central to all aspects of Velikovsky's thesis in Worlds in Collision, the task of reconciling Velikovsky's views and predictive statements about Venus with recent findings might be seen as a somewhat more difficult task than for the other cosmic bodies he mentions. But if we want to be true to the effort, we really must consider new evidence that has been uncovered from ancient sources since Velikovsky published it in 1950. Evidence that might uphold or contradict Velikovsky's claim that Venus began its life as a comet. And new data that could pertain to Velikovsky's predictions about Venus the planet, gathered by various modern space probes. In this current chapter, what we would hope to show, based on recently discovered ancient sources, is whether it appears that Velikovsky creatively misinterpreted, mistranslated, or otherwise mistook the ancient texts he studied as a way to wishfully fulfill his thesis, or whether more recent independent translation of texts will appear to support the scenario that he set down. In Worlds in Collision, Immanuel Velikovsky correlated statements from many different ancient cultures, quoting references to Venus from around 1500 BCE that seem to describe it as a brilliant, horned comet, shining brightly enough to induce ancient astronomers to classify it alongside the sun and the moon. Interestingly, ancient astronomic texts that have surfaced since Velikovsky wrote in 1950 do seem to support this view. For example, in China, a Shang dynasty oracle bone, which is, he gives the dates here as 1766 BCE to 1050 BCE. That was the Shang dynasty. An oracle bone, which is an ancient carved animal bone used to record astronomical events and the earliest known form of writing in China. This bone tells of the appearance in 1054 CE of a, quote, guest star, unquote, which is a term most likely used to describe a nova or supernova, right? So it appears where no star was visible before. And compares its appearance to Venus, stating that during daylight, it appeared like Venus, with horned rays radiating in all directions. Huh. Both the description,
So in other words, a new comet comes in and they're like, oh, it looked like Venus did back then. Is that what he's saying?
No. This is around the same time. It's in the right period.
Who's comparing it to Venus?
The ancient Chinese,
okay,
are saying that a supernova that looks like Venus that's visible during the day, with rays pointing in all directions.
Gotcha.
In other words, they're comparing a day visible supernova with rays pointing in all directions to Venus, because it looks like that and it's visible during the day, right?
Yes. Okay. Got it.
That's the point. This is both a description and stated time of visibility that cannot be reasonably applied to Venus today. A Korean astronomic reference from 1066 CE describes the appearance of a broom star, which is a comet, whose appearance and length was said to be like Venus. Another Korean observation from 1222 CE mentions, so this is very recent. CE is Common Era, so we're talking 1222 AD, basically. Mentions in regard to Halley's Comet that it was seen in daylight. Venus was also seen to cross the sky during the day. Likewise, there are textual references to Venus from ancient Japan that can be seen to similarly support Velikovsky's portrait of Venus as a comet, which turned into a planet.
I just had I don't know why I've never made this connection before. Maybe it's obvious, but broom star. Witch riding a broom.
Yeah.
It's a comet.
Yep. That's right. Wreaking havoc and evil on the land.
Exactly. Holy crap.
Burn them!
That's what happens. They come down and they burn.
They set everything on fire. That's right. Yeah, so I guess the point here is that all of these references to comets or supernovas with tails and they're being compared to Venus. They're just like Venus. We see them during the day. They've got these tails or horns or rays.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's not just like, oh yeah, we saw this new thing. No, they're later comparing new things that are showing up to Venus.
That's right.
That's what I was.
Additional evidence in support of Velikovsky's claim that Venus appeared first as a comet can be drawn from ancient Mesoamerican references. Susan Milbreth states in her book Star Gods of the Maya, the Aztec Codex, and she names it here, I can't pronounce it, represents Venus as a smoking star in 1533 CE, linking Venus to imagery of comets. And a Maya text in the Songs of something else I can't pronounce seems to identify Venus also as a smoking star. Smoking stars, the comet imagery. 1533 CE. It's very recent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Chapter 7. Could Venus have been ejected from Jupiter? So Velikovsky's scenario for the birth of Venus flies in the face of the traditional scientific view that planetary matter, accreted from material in the primordial cloud that surrounded the sun after its formation. However, it is interesting to note that none of Velikovsky's leading critics ever seems to have raised this point against him. The idea that a planet such as Venus could possibly be born from primordial material held in reserve in the form of a gas giant planet might seem at first like a rather whimsical notion, at least until we better understand the kinds of deeply rooted flaws that appear to exist in the two prevailing theories of planetary formation. So we were kind of talking about this earlier. The 1982 Encyclopedia Britannica states, it should be emphasized that no theory of the origin of the solar system has yet won general acceptance. All involve highly improbable assumptions. The difficulty is in trying to find a theory with any degree of probability at all.
Wow.
What goes unspoken in the debate between Velikovsky and more traditional scientists is the hushed prospect that Velikovsky's scenario for the origin of Venus may, in fact, be no less likely than any of their traditional theories.
Yeah. So that goes back to this idea of these probability calculations being based on the modern accepted standard model.
Yeah, that's right.
So going back to the gold thing, again, they're like, well, the probability of these stars colliding all the, you know, extremely low, so it doesn't account for all the gold. Well, maybe your model of the universe is wrong.
Right.
So your probability calculations are wrong.
Yeah. Yep. And they're post-predicting the past, which is like a thing that I don't like.
Yes. You don't like that thing.
So imagine for a moment that planets are typically born by ejection by some unknown process from gas giants. This theory would seem to be consistent with what we have actually found while researching solar systems outside of our own, which minimally consist of either two stars locked in a binary relationship or a star and a gas giant planet. Although some systems have been found that, like our solar system, include several smaller planets, these always appear to exist in the context of at least one gas giant. One pivot point for Velikovsky's thesis, upon which his broader theory might be largely affirmed or disproved, rests with the planet Jupiter. This point hangs on the question of whether a scenario will ultimately emerge that can credibly explain the ejection of a body as large as Venus from the massive gas giant planet Jupiter. Velikovsky wrote in the following in an article called "My Challenge to Conventional Views in Science," which he presented to the American Association for Advancement of Science in 1974. He says, there are problems requiring study that were not discussed in Worlds in Collision because the origin of Venus belongs to the volumes dealing with the earlier catastrophes. How did Venus escape from Jupiter 400 times more massive? And Littleton's work does give some idea, or how could Venus be so much heavier per unit of volume than Jupiter? Either it was expelled from inner parts of the planet, or gases like hydrogen entered into chemical compounds of higher molecular weight. So yeah, one of the problems that they're trying to point out is that Venus has a heavier mean density than Jupiter does.
Yeah, but I want to go full electric universe on this.
Okay.
You got the plasma, whatever they call it, the plasma stream or whatever going, you know, this galactic or intergalactic thing.
A giant Birkeland currents or something, whatever it is.
Yeah. The thing that's igniting the sun, right?
Okay, yeah.
And for a moment, and they, in the electric universe model, they're like, oh yeah, other stars and stuff, or other planets could have been the sun at certain times or whatever. Yeah. So you have this weird glitch in the plasma, or just this shift slightly, and it's like, this is Jupiter's attempt to become a star, right? It's boom, and then of course the
filament moves.
The filament switches back, and then it just ejects this massive, solidified, crystallized chunk of stuff comes flying out of it. Man. And that same thing that's causing the sun and to be what it is and all of its energy and everything is what caused it. So of course it's going to have a very regular.
Yeah, it will regularize its orbit.
Regularize. Yes. Yeah. Regularize.
Yeah, making up words.
Yeah. So just there's my electric universe
explanation. All right.
For what happened.
Cool. Okay, so Velikovsky says, in Worlds in Collision, I suggested that electrical discharges in the atmosphere of ammonia and methane, in which Jupiter is rich, would produce hydrocarbons of heavy molecular weight, an experiment successfully performed 10 years later. Further, I saw fusion of elements like oxygen and sulfur in interplanetary discharges. Carl Sagan, in his book Broca's Brain, calculated the... So that was the end of Velikovsky's quote, sorry. So Carl Sagan, in his book Broca's Brain, calculated the amount of energy that would be required to eject a Venus-sized body from Jupiter. He concluded that the energy would be enough to vaporize portions of Jupiter. Likewise, Sagan claimed that the vaporized material would have become so intensely hot that it would still remain extremely hot even today.
And Jupiter's cold, don't you know?
These same calculations were presented in a paper by Sagan at the 1974 American Association for the Advancement of Science Symposium in San Francisco, which was later published in the book Scientists Confront Velikovsky. Sagan wrote, "Any event which would have ejected a comet or planet from Jupiter would have brought it to a temperature of at least several thousand degrees and would have completely melted it." Sagan also cited the velocities in kilometers per second that would be required to escape the gravitational pulls of Jupiter, which is 70 kilometers per second, although Velikovsky later corrected him, pointing out that the true value would be somewhat lower. Yeah, Sagan got it wrong. And of the sun itself, for the distance of Jupiter's orbit, which is 20 kilometers per second. And Sagan then argued against the slim possibility that a cataclysmic event could have occurred for Jupiter that would have accelerated a material to a speed just sufficient to escape Jupiter, but not so much as to escape from the solar system entirely, concluding that this made Velikovsky's scenario untenable.
I feel like you could do this for a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's like somebody catches a baseball.
Like, that is incredibly improbable. Yeah.
Work out all the calculations.
Yeah.
Nah, it didn't happen.
Didn't happen. However, the fallacy in Sagan's argument can be readily seen if we adopt a similar approach when discussing well-accepted theories of astronomy, such as the formation of the moon. Scientists today realize that all life on our planet owes its existence to the very fortuitous size and mass of the moon and the relative distance and speed of its orbit in relation to the Earth. And one could argue that the chances of our moon forming in just such a way as to meet all of these specific requirements for life would be, in retrospect, so very slim that life should never have evolved here. Clearly, Sagan must have understood that the likeliest theory cannot necessarily be argued to be the correct scientific one, and that any argument that is based on retroactive calculation of probability is prone to be spurious. See?
Yeah.
Laird agrees with me. Retroactive calculation of probability. It's prone to be spurious. Another excellent counterexample would be the formation of the universe itself, which rests on minuscule differences in the uniform distribution and temperature of matter in order to account for the formation of the many galaxies and stars in the specific form we see. If we allow Sagan's brand of logic in our discussion, we can effectively argue that the universe itself cannot reasonably exist. Sagan also argued that Venus, as we know it, could not have been formed from the atmosphere of Jupiter. At the time Velikovsky first wrote, the best the scientists of the 1950s could do was make educated guesses as to the likely composition of the atmosphere of Jupiter, so there were no guarantees that its actual composition would ultimately be found to support Velikovsky's views. However, since 1950, the United States has sent 6 probes to Jupiter that have returned data on many different aspects of the planet. Based on the findings of those probes, most scientists today understand that the atmosphere of Jupiter does contain the raw materials required to form a planet like Venus. Most scientists now consider the atmosphere of Jupiter to be a well-preserved remnant of the primordial cloud, the nebula from which the planets and other bodies of the solar system initially formed. So if it's a real well-preserved remnant of the primordial cloud from which all other planets formed,
Yep.
then Sagan was wrong, and you can make a Venus from Jupiter's stuff, right?
Seems logical.
Yeah. If the solar system itself can form from that primordial cloud.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So as we have mentioned previously, according to the ancient Greek myths to which Velikovsky refers when discussing the birth of Venus, the comet Venus was ejected shortly after Metis, the pregnant mother of Pallas Athena, or Venus, was swallowed whole by Zeus, or Jupiter. Until very recently, this mythical scenario was thought to bear no factual relationship to astronomical science as it pertains to our solar system or the planet Jupiter. However, An August 2010 article in New Scientist magazine by science reporter David Shiga suggests that important, mysterious physical properties of Jupiter not only support specific details of the myth, but actually invite us to believe that just such a scenario may well have occurred. And now he's quoting from this article. Jupiter and Saturn are thought to have begun life as rocky worlds with the mass of at least a few Earths. Their gravity then pulled in gas from the birth nebula, giving them dense atmospheres. In this picture, all gas giants should have cores of roughly the same size. Yet spacecraft-based gravity measurements suggest Jupiter's core weighs just 2 to 10 Earth masses, while Saturn's comes in at 15 to 30.
Wow.
New simulations by Shunlin Li of Peking University in China and colleagues may explain why. They calculated what would happen when a super-Earth of 10 times the mass of our planet slammed into a gas giant. The rocky body flattened like a pancake when it hit the gas giant's atmosphere and then barreled into the giant's core about half an hour later. Man.
Oh, my God.
The energy of the collision could have vaporized much of the core, and these vaporized heavy elements would then have mixed with the hydrogen and helium of the gas giant's atmosphere, leaving only a fraction of the gas giant's former core behind. This could explain not only why Jupiter's core is so small, but also why its atmosphere is much richer in heavy elements compared with the Sun, whose composition is thought to mirror that of the nebula that gave birth to the solar system's planets. So, just as Sagan calculated when making his arguments against Velikovsky, the impact scenario proposed by Shulin Li would have generated energies sufficient to vaporize the core of Jupiter, which is envisioned to have originally been comparable in size to the larger cores of other gas giants. Likewise, models suggest that the impact would have left Jupiter with the much smaller core as it currently has, and which continues to be, as Sagan said it would become, intensely hot. NASA estimates the core temperature of Jupiter to be 23,871 degrees Celsius or 43,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Almost twice as hot as the core of Saturn and even hotter than the surface of the Sun.
That's insane. So it's still exploding,
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
It is one giant storm.
Yeah, it is. It's if it was hit by something that big, like they're saying, something 10 Earths, right? Metis. This would be Metis. Yeah. And that planet's, and it's a rocky world. And that planet starts to go into Jupiter's atmosphere. It flattens it out into a big disk, like a pancake, he says. And then it takes it half an hour to get all the way to the middle of the planet.
That's crazy.
And it's doing all kinds of who knows what crazy stuff. And the fusion energies at the front, the shockwave in front of it is turning all kinds of simple things into complex things. Yes.
Right. And gold.
Yeah.
Lots of gold.
And diamonds. Probably. Heat and pressure and carbon. It seems somewhat more than ironic that Sagan's calculations, which he proffered as a way of illustrating the gross untenability of Velikovsky's scenario for the birth of Venus, might in the end serve as points of reference by which Xu Lin Li's model can be effectively correlated to Velikovsky's scenario. That's what I'm saying. Sagan's like, look, it would be crazy and it would be incredibly hot. And they're like, well, yeah, it actually is hotter than the sun. It weighs way less than it should. Jupiter should have a bigger core than Saturn.
Right. Still has more mass, though, right?
Yes. Yeah. But its core is way less massy.
Yeah.
You know, what do they say? Between 5 and 2 to 10 Earth masses.
Yeah.
Jupiter's core, whereas Saturn comes in at 15 to 30.
30, yeah. I have to retract the gold statement because if these scientists are right, it takes neutron star collisions to make it. So.
No, because supernovas make it.
Well, the crazy flipping something supernovas.
Well, any supernova supposedly makes gold.
Oh, okay.
In some quantity.
Okay.
Because the supernova...
So it would make lots of it.
Right. The supernova event itself is so energetic that a whole bunch of higher level fusion can take place.
Right.
So, If we were looking for a mechanism by which material within Jupiter's atmosphere might theoretically have been collected, cohered, and transported into space and away from Jupiter, we would need to look no further than Jupiter's Great Red Spot, the mammoth perpetual storm that is thought by some scientists to be a permanent feature of the Jovian atmosphere. Findings made by the most recent probes to Jupiter suggest that this gigantic storm, which measures 3 Earths in diameter at its largest point, serves as a kind of atmospheric elevator capable of shuttling superheated material from near the core of Jupiter to the dramatically cooler uppermost reaches of its atmosphere. So yeah, the dramatically cooler uppermost reaches.
Yeah. Well, vastly expanded, right? Much lower pressures.
Right. I'm just saying, like, the cold Jupiter thing.
Right, yeah,
It's the top part.
I mean, yeah, you look at Earth and you go way up there, it's cold.
Yeah, it's cold.
It's low pressure.
Yeah. One web-based article tells us, scientists think the Great Red Spot has its characteristic red color because the strength of the storm is digging down into Jupiter's atmosphere, bringing complex organic molecules to the high atmosphere.
Huh.
And another source includes the following statement. The atmospheres of both Saturn and Jupiter are highly dynamic. The activity in their atmospheres is represented by eddy and storm structures seen on their surfaces. Long-lived oval structures in Jupiter display clockwise rotations at the northern hemisphere and are therefore high-pressure storm systems. These oval structures tend to disappear within the jet system of the planet or merge with the bigger features, such as the Great Red Spot. In Saturn, storm structures erupt almost every 30 years, but the mechanism triggering these is still unknown. Surprisingly, the jet systems and other features, such as the Great Red Spot of Jupiter, are able to remain in such an active atmosphere. This is probably because the mass of the jets is bigger than that of the eddies, but this is only possible if the roots of these circulations extend to great depths. Theories suggest that the liquid interior also rotates with them, creating roots that extend all the way to the core of the planet.
Man, that's crazy. Don't want to be in that tornado.
No, you don't.
That is... What's up with the rings? Saturn's rings. What's going on with that? I know it's way off topic, but I'm just like...
I mean, no one is they have to be young. They can't ring structures like that don't last long according to standard model.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's like
it's a busted moon or something. Oh, man. Well, multiple busted moons. But yeah, a ring structure like that is beautiful, but they're very, they don't last long according to standard model stuff. I don't really know. And there's interesting pictures of stuff moving through the rings, right?
Yes.
Pulling stuff around and leaving trails.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what is it composed of? Tiny little ice bits? Hornflakes?
Yeah. Hornflakes.
Fucking made of hornflakes, bro.
That's right.
Hornflakes and manners.
That's so many mysteries. I don't even know what to do with them all.
Yeah. Yeah, the solar system's full of problems. I love the fact that our math is like, yeah, so starting from time equals 0 now, calculating in either direction, past or future, it gets chaotic.
Yeah, that's great.
So we're like, how are we at this stable period? There's just no way to do it. We can't solve the in-body problem.
Yeah, I also love the fact that all the probabilities of what actually exists are so ridiculously low to make them impossible.
Yeah. Which seems like the models are wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's some, it's like, what was that story? There's scientists discover one missing piece of dark matter.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. You mean the part that the dark matter itself?
Yeah.
Have they found that part yet? Because it's missing.
It's great.
All right. We're done?
Yep.
Time ran out. Sands of time have run empty for this week, folks. So next week, let's talk about this briefly, right?
Yeah. Going out of town.
Yeah. So there will be a roadsode, hopefully.
There will be, surely.
Yeah.
Something. We'll do something.
Yeah.
You don't know what to expect. It's kind of last minute.
Yeah.
Going on a trip.
So it won't be part 3 of this series, most likely.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I'll have time to do all that.
Yeah, probably not.
So
we're leaving Sunday,
Yeah.
going to one place, and then coming back, and then Thursday going to another place with Brandel and Rad.
Yeah. That's right. Brandel and Rad. So maybe we'll just do a road show with Brandel and Rad. We can drag them into the hotel room and be like, get on the mic. Let's talk about it.
It's actually a Sedona. It's a trip. You can look it up online.
Yeah, I guess if anybody's nearby and wants to go.
Yeah. We're not putting it on, but it's in Sedona. Let me pull up the site. Okay, so Google, if you're interested, Google Randall Sedona, and there's an eventbrite.com site that has this like explanation of the event, October 22nd through the 25th. There's also a weekend only that's cheaper. And yeah, contact them, see what the deal is. It's very last minute for us and Randall and the guy putting it on.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm sure he'd like to have more people. So it was on the fence for a while, but they're doing it. So we didn't even know till like this morning.
Yeah, basically.
So check it out if you want to go and get a wild dragon hair up your ass. Sorry.
Yeah. One of those things in that place.
I'll take that out.
All right.
I was already too far in to bail on it. Sorry, folks.
Yep. Just had to plow through.
Yeah.
All right. You guys can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. I'm able to read less and less of the emails we get, but keep sending them. You know, you never know.
Well, you read them all, just not on the show.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I read all the emails, but I can't read them all on the show. So, website, brothersoftheserpent.com. You can find the encyclopedia there, the glossary, the Snakeskins, which is our merchandise store. And also the archive is there. I need to keep mentioning this, the archive of shows. So if you're using your podcast feed and you scroll all the way to the back and you see like episode 60 or something, all the previous shows are archived on the website, and they're also available on YouTube. So, and you can join the Pyramid Scheme, help out the show, send us straight to pyramids, help us buy better equipment sometimes, or go on field trips.
Yeah, and we are using Pyramid Scheme from all of you great people to go on the Sedona trip.
That's right. That's right. And then when we get there, we're going to steal the rest of it from Randall. That's the plan. So you can support us through Patreon, or if you don't like that, if you're worried that they're going down, that's fine. You can use PayPal, and the buttons are right there on the website. Give us reviews wherever you can, but especially in the iTunes store. That helps a lot to spread the shows. And thank you guys so much for giving us reviews, all of you who have. Share the shows wherever you can. Follow us on Twitter @SnakeBros with no vowels. Join the Facebook group or join the Discord. That's what I really recommend to everybody. The Discord is where we're all at. There's plenty of people in the Facebook group too if you're a Facebook person. But Kyle and I are in the Discord occasionally, trolling people. Yep, it's nonstop. It's relentless. The Discord is run by Jeff, who also runs the Library of the Serpent. You can check that out. It's got all kinds of books and interesting papers and everything that are connected with the show and the topics we talk about.
Libraryoftheserpent.com.
That's right. And thanks to History Shift, who makes all of our videos and puts them on YouTube for us, and he basically runs the YouTube site. So thanks so much to him. Follow him @History Shift. You can find him on YouTube and on Twitter, and also his website, his awesome website for it, detailing his explorations in Montana, historyshift.com. Check out Pod Doodles. He makes videos of our podcast while doodling, so you can watch him draw while listening to the show. It's pretty cool. Check him out. Cosmographia is the podcast we do with Randall Carlson. And thanks to all the podcasts, Where Did the Road Go, Uncharted X, Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape, The C Word, Grimerica, Conspiranormal, The 7 Ages Audio Journal, and Skeptico, and all of you listeners out there. We love you guys so much.
Always have.
Always will. Good night, Adamu. Get back to work.